Hello everyone. So just before I get on to the main topic of the video, which is to do with Anglicanism and a question for Anglicans, for my dear Anglicans who have sometimes watched my videos, and I know some of you have because I've seen your comments underneath some of my videos, even from Anglican priests, not just lay people. I do have this big question I want to ask you related to the Anglican Church, the Anglican faith. But just before I do that, I do want to briefly address the Charlie Kirk assassination. I didn't post an immediate reaction video to this because I didn't feel it was the thing to do. I think a lot of people put out videos as soon as it happened or put out live streams because they knew it would get lots of hits. People would be typing Charlie Kirk into the search engine or on YouTube, and then they would come across their video and that would give them hits, that would give them views. I didn't want to do that. I also didn't feel I could add a whole lot. There were lots of people giving reactions. There were plenty of people in the USA, many of whom were his friends or people who knew him in some way, giving their thoughts, and I just felt my take on this as a Catholic YouTuber in the UK wasn't going to add a whole lot. But I do want to make a comment on it just to let you know that it isn't something I've missed. I obviously did see this news, and it's obviously very shocking. Just the pain that his family must be feeling is probably indescribable. It shows what hatred can do. You know, it seems like he was assassinated by someone who simply couldn't handle the things that he was saying. I did have a few suspicions as to whether this was just a lone wolf or whether this was something that was arranged and coordinated from higher up, because it was done so professionally, or at least it seemed to be done so professionally. But I don't know, and it could well have just been one person who hated him and decided to take his life. I think some of the comments that I've seen in the British media, in some of the articles, when I say comments, I mean some of the stuff that's been written by the media, have been horrific. And it may well have happened also in other media, in sort of liberal media in the USA, etc. But I've seen some of these media outlets talking about how Charlie Kirk had this view and how he had that view and how he referred to the UK as a hellhole and how he was pro-gun and how he had controversial views on transgenderism, etc. Almost as if they're indirectly trying to suggest that he kind of deserved it. Of course, they're not saying that, but why would you bring up things to try and show that he was a bad person? In your mind, a bad person. Basically, he just disagreed with you. But why would you bring these things up in these articles right after he's just been killed? It seems quite disgusting, to be honest. And there have, of course, also been, as could have been expected, sadly, some awful things posted on social media like TikTok. I've only seen a few clips, but just short clips of people celebrating that he's been killed. And I actually think these kind of people must be very miserable in their lives. I don't feel angry at them. I just think they're very sad, unhappy people. Because I think if you are a happy person who feels loved, you feel loved by your family, you feel loved by the person you're in a relationship with, etc., you don't do this kind of thing. Even if you strongly disagree with a lot of what Charlie Kirk said, you still wouldn't do this. You wouldn't get on to TikTok and celebrate the killing of this man, because you would know that that just isn't the thing to do. But I think these people, a lot of them live on places like TikTok. That's their life. And they crave attention, they seek attention, and even doing something like this that they know will probably get them some attention, even if it's negative, is something they choose to do. I believe even the president of the Oxford Union celebrated this and said something like, Charlie Kirk's been shot, and then posted a laughing emoji or something like that. So, you know, there are some people that are really disturbed that they don't seem to know where that line is of decency, even if it's someone who you believe is on the other side of the aisle when it comes to views, general views in life, politics, etc., you should know where the line is. There are plenty of people in politics and in other areas of life who I strongly disagree with, and even at times have really disliked. I would never wish this kind of thing on them. Some of them in politics, I would wish they left politics, but I wouldn't wish this kind of thing on them. But anyway, it's a very sad thing, of course, and it seems we're learning, or we're going to be learning more about the person who did this. It's odd to see certain media reports suggesting that they don't know the motive for it. I think it's pretty clear that this guy hated Charlie Kirk's views, whether it was some particular views that he disliked more than others. There have been suggestions that his views on transgenderism were something that particularly annoyed the killer, because I believe he had a roommate who had gender dysphoria, thought they were transgender, and so that could be the main thing. We'll find out. It's a horrible thing, obviously, and I'm sure many prayers are needed now for his family. It's a shocking thing. It's still difficult even now when talking about it to believe that it's happened, because he was on social media so often. There are so many videos of him doing debates with people, answering questions, and a lot of those debates were very tactful. You know, he wasn't attacking people, he was trying to be respectful, but of course he was trying to change hearts and minds. And he would often talk to people with opposing views and have discussions with them and see if he could get them to think about things slightly differently. He would often talk about God. He would often talk about the importance of the family. So he was very much on the right side of the aisle when it comes to that. Anyway, moving on from that rather sad topic, I do have a question for my dear Anglican viewers. And it's related to the Holy Communion. So this is something I haven't been able to find an answer to when I've tried to research it online, and I haven't been able to find an answer to this when I have asked Anglicans about it. And I have also spoken to Anglican priests, and I have spoken to Anglican vergers, and I get different answers depending on who I talk to. So it relates to the actual communion wafer during Holy Communion and what Anglicans believe it is. When I spoke to an Anglican priest about this, he told me in memoriam. It is basically a memory of what happened. It's a remembrance of the Last Supper. When I spoke to a verger about this, they told me they believe it's something much more than that. It's the body of Christ. And if that wafer was to fall on the floor, or if somebody was to leave it somewhere, they would either consume it or dissolve it. So it obviously is much more than just a symbolic wafer. Now, I would like to know what the Church of England teaches on this, because it seems like you'll get a different answer depending on who you speak with in the Anglican Church. Is there an actual church teaching on what the Holy Communion is? Because you could say the same thing about the Catholic Church, that some Catholics have opposing views on what the Eucharist actually is. And if you look at a number of surveys, it's actually quite frightening to see how many Catholics don't believe that the Holy Communion is the actual body of Christ. But those Catholics are actually opposing the teaching of the Church. So it isn't a case of, well, different people can believe different things. You believe whatever you want to believe. It's a case of, this is what the Church teaches. And the Catholics who say, yes, this is the body of Christ, are following what their church teaches. And the Catholics who say, no, this isn't the body of Christ, they don't believe it is, they are going against what their church teaches. So what is the case in Anglicanism? Is there an actual teaching where you can say, those Anglicans are going along with what their church is saying, and those Anglicans are opposing it? Or is there no actual teaching? Because it's beginning to look to me like there isn't actually a teaching on this. But that is why I'm coming to you to ask you, dear Anglican, maybe you have information that I haven't been able to find, and you'll be able to point me to a specific canon in the Church of England that actually talks about this and says, no, this is what it is. And perhaps there is something like that. Perhaps there is a teaching that says, yes, transubstantiation does occur during the Holy Communion, and this does become the body of Christ. Obviously, as Catholics, we wouldn't believe that that actually takes place in the Anglican Church, even if some Anglicans believe that, because we believe they don't have valid orders to be able to do such a thing. But still, at least there would be a clear teaching in the Anglican Church that says this is what this is. But as I said, I'm not convinced there is. Do let me know if there is, folks, in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching the video. Have yourselves a blessed day.